If I made $100,000 a year, I'd be set for life. That line, or some version of it, showed up in basically every movie and sitcom made in the 80s and 90s. $100,000 was Hollywood shorthand for made it. The character who hit that number got the nice apartment, the reliable car, the sense that money problems were officially over. I remember thinking as a kid that six figures basically meant you'd want a life. A lot of people your age thought exactly that, and a lot of them are earning six figures right now, wondering where the winning feeling went. These days, plenty of people earning six figures still feel like they're barely keeping up, still checking their account before a big purchase, still nowhere near the effortless comfort that number used to represent on screen. Either an entire generation of $100,000 earners suddenly forgot how to manage money, or the number itself quietly stopped meaning what it used to mean. It's the second one, and the actual math behind it is almost jarring once you see it laid out. Let's start with plain inflation, because this is the most direct piece of the puzzle. $100,000 in 1990 had the purchasing power of roughly $256,000 today. Not a typo. To buy the same actual stuff, the same groceries, the same car, the same slice of a house that a $100,000 salary could buy in 1990, you need to be earning somewhere north of $250,000 today. Wait, so today's $100,000 is worth less than 40% of what it used to be worth? Just under 40%. Yeah, you're not imagining that the number stretches less far than it sounds like it should. It genuinely does, because the number itself never got updated in most people's heads, even though prices absolutely did. Nobody sends out a memo when a benchmark like that quietly stops meaning what it used to mean. It just keeps getting repeated in movies, in conversations, in that voice in your own head, decades after the math underneath it changed completely. That's already a big piece of the story. But it's not the whole thing, because there's a second, completely separate reason $100,000 doesn't carry the same weight it used to. It isn't rare anymore. In 1990, the median American household earned $29,943 a year. $100,000 back then wasn't just a lot of money. It was over 3 times what a typical household brought home, genuinely elite territory, the kind of income that put you in a completely different tier from almost everyone around you. Today, the median household income has climbed to somewhere around $83,700. $100,000 now sits barely 20% above that median. It went from 3 times what everyone else makes to a bit above average, without the number itself changing at all. Being 3 times the typical income and being 20% above it are 2 completely different social experiences, even if the raw dollar figure printed on the paycheck never budged. The first one buys you a genuinely different lifestyle than the people around you. The second one buys you a slightly nicer version of the same lifestyle everyone else is already living, which is a much less satisfying place to end up after doing everything you were told would make you rich. So the number stayed exactly the same, but everything around it moved. Exactly. It's the same optical illusion as standing still while the ground shifts underneath you. You haven't gone anywhere. Nothing around you stayed put either. Now layer the actual cost of the specific things that used to define, making it on top of both of those shifts. Housing is the clearest example. Back in 1990, the typical home cost around 3 times the typical household's income. Today, that ratio has climbed to roughly 5 times income nationally, and considerably higher in plenty of major cities. Even accounting for inflation, the average monthly mortgage payment today runs about 40% higher in real terms than it did in 1990. So the exact same solid 6-figure income buys a comfortable house, assumption that used to hold up in 1990 simply doesn't compute the same way against today's home prices, even before you account for the fact that the income itself buys less to begin with. My uncle bought his first house on a job that probably paid less than what I make now. And in 1990, that math actually worked out fine for him. Run the same numbers today, on today's home prices, and that same job wouldn't clear the front door of the same house. Then there's the part of the paycheck that never makes it to your bank account at all. $100,000 gets taxed federally, often taxed again at the state level, depending on where you live, and has payroll taxes taken directly off the top before you ever see a dollar of it. None of that is new. Exactly. But the combination of a higher cost of living and a paycheck that's already been trimmed on the way and means the number printed on your offer letter and the number you actually get to spend on your life are two very different figures. And the gap between them is exactly the part that doesn't show up in the "if I made six figures, I'd be rich" fantasy. I always calculate my budget off my salary, not off what actually lands in my account. That's an extremely normal mistake, and it's a big part of why the fantasy number and the lived experience never line up. The $100,000 you imagined and the roughly 70-something thousand that actually shows up across a year of paychecks are functionally two different numbers. And where you actually live changes this entire equation dramatically. $100,000 in a major coastal city, after rent or a mortgage at big city prices, can leave less real spending power than a much smaller salary in a lower-cost region. Someone earning that same amount in a smaller, cheaper metro can end up with dramatically more left over at the end of every month, simply because the exact same paycheck is competing against a completely different set of prices. The number on the paycheck is identical everywhere. What it actually buys you is not. And a huge amount of the "why doesn't this feel like enough" frustration comes from comparing your specific $100,000 in your specific expensive zip code against a decades-old, one-size-fits-all idea of what that number was supposed to mean. There's one more piece worth naming, because it's less about the number itself and more about what used to come attached to it. A good six-figure job in 1990 often came bundled with things that quietly added enormous value beyond the salary itself. A pension that guaranteed income for life, employer-covered healthcare that didn't eat a growing chunk of every paycheck, and a real expectation of staying at that job and that income for decades. $100,000 today often arrives with none of that scaffolding underneath it, just the number itself, expected to cover retirement savings and healthcare costs that used to be somebody else's job to provide. So even if the paycheck were somehow identical, the job attached to it isn't? Not even close. Compare the two fairly, and the 1990 version of a $100,000 job was never just a bigger paycheck. It was a bigger paycheck plus a support structure that today's version usually has to build entirely out of that same paycheck instead, which means a meaningful slice of today's $100,000 is quietly doing a job that used to belong to somebody else's budget entirely. Put all of these pieces together, and the picture becomes pretty clear. The number in the culture's head never updated. The purchasing power behind it quietly dropped to under 40% of its old self. The rarity that used to make it feel special evaporated as the median income itself grew closer to it. And the specific goods, especially housing, that a six-figure income was supposed to comfortably afford, got dramatically more expensive relative to income than they used to be. None of that is a personal failure. It's several completely separate economic shifts, stacked on top of each other, all quietly working against the exact same three-digit number that pop culture never bothered to adjust for inflation. So if you're earning $100,000 a year and it doesn't feel like the finish line you were promised, that's not a sign you're bad with money. It's a sign you're comparing your very real, very current paycheck against a benchmark that was set decades ago and never got the memo that the world moved on without it. It's still more than enough income to build genuine wealth on, paired with the same disciplined habits that always mattered more than the raw number, automated saving, avoiding lifestyle creep, letting time do the heavy lifting. The problem was never the paycheck. It was the outdated finish line sitting in your head. If you want the full breakdown of what income actually does feel comfortable in today's dollars, adjusted for where you live, let me know in the comments and I'll build that one next.